Yes. 4:15, you ready, Donna?
Go for it.
All right, let's call this meeting to order.
Donna. Got it.
First things first, I'm going to cover norms for our academics committee meetings. All are welcome to join at the table, so if any of you would like to be brave souls and join us, you are welcome to. We're going to stay focused on the agenda topics out of fairness for our participants, our presenters, and the public. We will listen to others and share in a respectful manner. And then we want to be mindful that the Finance Committee follows us, so we will end promptly at 5:15. And the first item on the agenda is the teacher evaluation for 24-25. So if I can draw your attention to these two forms, and they're also online. And I've invited 3 teachers. We have Abby Patterson is here from SCAPE. We have Danielle Gonzalez who's here from Central, and hopefully we'll have Amanda joining us from both. So this really started from feedback from teachers. We've had the NEE process for teacher evaluation, I think since 2017-ish. And during 2018 budget cuts, we used some of those scores to determine if teachers were repurposed to another building. And so we didn't do ourselves any favors in that process. And so how that works is we pick 2 indicators, and sometimes there's 3 indicators if a building chooses another one. And then the teachers are scored on a scale from 0 to 7 on those indicators. And what we have found from listening to teachers is that those numbers are defeating, they're deflating. And so the teacher observation process is supposed to be a quality discussion between the teacher and the administrator who's evaluating. And it should all be focused on growth and how we grow teachers and mold them into the highest quality teacher that we can get in our classrooms. So unfortunately, when we walk in, sometimes you're going to see direct instruction. That's okay. That is a part of the process. But if you're looking at that NEE scale, that may put a teacher at a 2 or a 3 or a 4. Teachers see that and they feel like they are a 2, a 3, or 4. So we've gotten this feedback. Last year we had a focus group with teachers across the district. Danielle was a part of that process. I think Amanda was too, and I know Abby you weren't. But we heard loud and clear that those numbers are defeating. So at that time, the teacher evaluation system had already renewed with NEE, but we knew that that was something that we needed to focus on for the following year. So that's where we're at. We have ended our contract with NEE, and we are wanting to shift to a classroom observation form that is more focused on the qualitative feedback for the teacher rather than a number. So if you look at that teacher observation form, and I've intentionally wrote on here because it's not set in stone yet, we have all of the standards for Missouri teachers listed on here. Now, our focus group knows this, but for DESE, we have to submit a number for all of our teachers. But we do not have to see that on the evaluation system. So what we would like to shift to is categories that state the teacher is meeting the expectations, there's a growth opportunity, or there's an area of concern. And then leave the comments box to really capture the feedback. And so it's a little bit more generalized. I have sent this to all of our teachers who are part of that focus group. And then I've been touching base with our 3 who were going to be present tonight. And if you guys have anything to chime in when I'm talking, please do. So this is kind of what we are wanting to do for next year. So this would allow principals to see all 9 standards and provide feedback on those standards. But if there was one that they're not seeing that, we definitely don't want to ding a teacher for it. So not all of them would be required for every observation. The second piece of that, sometimes we have a teacher who has a specific area where we want to see improvement. So maybe that teacher is focusing on engaging students into the lesson. On that, we could use the short form and the drop-down menu on this form. You can't see it as well on paper here, but you can online. It would be part of The indicators, you could drop down and pick student engagement and provide feedback for just that indicator, if that's what the focus is for that teacher. Does that make sense? So let me see. So the system that we will be using is Talent Ed. It's also called Unified Talent Perform. We are already using that platform. We use that for hiring. That's how our applications come to us. And we're also using that for support staff evaluations. Any feedback on this? Or I would love to hear your guys' perspective of shifting to this, if you guys could share.
I'm definitely like the feedback meets expectation, growth, opportunity, because like you said, sometimes they don't see the picture and you get deemed and you feel like you do feel defeated, because I know a couple times I felt like that. So.
Yeah.
So this, because I'm that person who is constructive with feedback, so this would definitely help me in knowing, see what I can keep growing in, or if I'm already there, and then what picture they did see and not what was missing. So sure.
I would say in the old form, I think the intent was good, that they wanted to show growth, but when you pop in for 10 minutes, like you said, you might just be seeing actual directions being given versus the kids critically thinking, so I don't think that was, I think the intent was good, but I don't think it worked the way it should have. So I like this idea of just, which one are you at? It's a little bit more simplified, not as confusing, and I think it would make teachers feel just better about themselves. I think the other, from what you said, if somebody walked in and you get a 2, you don't feel so good about yourself that day, but you might have done amazing things in the last 20 minutes of the class that nobody saw. So, I think that's just a little bit more streamlined and easier to follow.
Okay. Any questions about this process? I feel like we value the feedback from our teachers, and we're making decisions based on their feedback. So guys, if you had negatives about this, challenge me. Nothing. Okay, just
I know
making
in
sure.
the corporate world, they use SAR, situation, action, result, and they have the actual employee give the situation, action, result, and then the observation comes into play afterwards. Is that something you are trying to accomplish with this?
It's interesting that you say that, because back in the day, when I was a brand new teacher, we used to have a pre-conference with our principal, and we would say, okay, this is what you're going to see in the whole lesson, and then Gary Johnson came and did my evaluation, and it was the whole 50-minute block of the class, which we've talked about providing that for our teachers. DESE recommends that we have unscheduled visits, but I think there's value, and I think our team would agree with that if you schedule that and the teacher has an opportunity to prepare, you get to see their very best. And I think that's something that...
it's essentially a performance.
Right, right. And then we know what they're capable of.
Yeah.
So there's still not a formal evaluation, which is what that is, and everything is evaluated on a drop-in?
Right now, yes.
Oh, wow.
They're all random, and they're all 10 to 15 minutes. So we've moved completely away from that 15-minute
I would think we
observation.
would want to have at least one throughout
Yeah.
the year,
Yeah.
formal evaluation, and then drop-ins, of course, but
Right.
that's...
So we're doing some shifting. It's interesting how we circle back to things we used to do. That's kind of what we're doing. So, but I just want to put this out there, really for our teachers to know too, because it has been a source of contention. I think just when they see that number 3 or 4, they can't even hear the feedback sometimes. So just knowing that we're going to get past that. But then on the backside, because I feel like for transparency purposes, there is a number that's submitted through Talent Ed that would go to DESE. So, and that's no different from directors and everyone else. We all have that number that goes to DESE, but we don't want to see it. We just want to focus on the qualitative piece and the growth.
So how soon after that time in classroom do you get to talk to that teacher? after that
72
observation?
hours is what NE recommends, but we are going to encourage 24 hours. We know, I think that's with anything, when you do an observation or when a kid has a discipline infraction, the sooner that you can have that discussion, process it, and get the feedback, the sooner you're going to see correction, and it's valuable. It's more valuable that way when it's timely. So we haven't ironed out all the details of the teacher evaluation handbook yet, but these are just the two key pieces that we wanted to share and let teachers know that, and hopefully they'll stay with us for next year, knowing that this system is going to change for the better.
And I think this will be a big piece on retaining teachers, how they're observed, because if it's been that snapshot, you know, I know administrators' times, you know, they get off schedule too, and if you're jumping in at the beginning of a class or at the end of a class, you're not seeing teaching, you know, you're seeing the beginning of the class and the end of the class, and they can't be at everybody's meatball time right in the middle of the lesson, but I think this is a retention thing too, in how we evaluate our teachers. Would you agree that that's a retention thing, the better that you can, you know, be evaluated?
Yeah, because I remember when I first started teaching, it was that formal observation and the pre-op, and I really like that because you can discuss it. And a lot of times you can't find the time to discuss in depth, like, you know, what your lesson was about. So this would help that too.
I think the mentor program also helps with that, because I know I'm mentoring a teacher in my building, and he came to me and just said, oh my gosh, I am epically failing. Like, he just felt like it was a complete failure, when really he was just starting out and learning. And so once I pointed that out to him, he was like, oh, so I'm okay. Like, if he hadn't had that feedback immediately, like, he immediately came to me and said, I don't know what to expect when I go in. Is he gonna, you know, like, am I going to be in trouble? Am I going to, you know, what's going to happen from there? And I was like, you're going to have a conversation. It's going to be fine. And so, but he didn't know that. So I just think, especially for those new teachers, just setting them up for success and making them feel like they can be successful and that we're going to help them be successful is super important. Because otherwise, I think he might have been out the front door. Yeah. So, yeah, the mentor program, I think, helps a lot with that feedback as well.
Well, what you said is important. You want them to be successful.
Yeah.
So this is not designed to shut them out the door.
Yeah, with the current one, he really did not feel that way at all. Like, yeah, not at all. So I think that will be a huge jump to make them feel, just because it's not seen doesn't mean you're going to get dinged because you didn't see it. So I think that'll be super helpful.
Thank you all three of you for sharing. Yeah. Okay, we will move on to item number 2, which is the career ladder plan for 24-25. This will replace Closing the Gap. So this, for the past 2 years, we've had Closing the Gap, and that has been a source of financial support to our teachers to provide tutoring or to sponsor clubs, to have professional learning and have financial compensation through those activities. That has all been funded through ESSER dollars, which is ending at the end of this year. So we will transition to DESE's Career Ladder program in 24-25. DESE requires us to submit a plan to them, and we have to have that approved in April, which includes how many staff will participate at each tier. So there's 3 different tiers. And the participants will track their activities and the categories. And I think it's important to note that, because I think Danielle, you sent me some feedback. DESE can request an audit at any time. And at that point, we would have to know how many teachers we have at stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, how many hours have been in tutoring. And so they can ask for that at any time. So that's why we have to do the paperwork process and keep all those activities separate and documented. So St. Joe will request 60% of the funds covered by the state through a grant. So that is something that I will work on as I complete this application. In our plan, when I submit that to DESE, it's also part of a grant. So if we are approved, which I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be, 40% would be covered locally, and then they would cover 60% of those fees. So if we look through this, there's 2 big changes, actually 3 changes compared to Closing the Gap. So the first big one is one we really can't control. DESE does not allow teachers in year 1 and 2 to participate. So that's something that we've been able to do for the past 2 years. I've already talked to Stacia Studer, and she leads our professional learning and our mentors. So we are working on an additional pay rate for mentors in their years 1 and 2 rather than having them utilize this program. And then the second one is a requirement of 50% of the hours being student contact hours. That could be through tutoring, through clubs. Our counselors are also part of this program, so that could be something that they are doing with mentoring kids. And then the third one is graduate courses. So that's something that we've allowed with Closing the Gap. If someone is seeking a graduate degree and it's a course in curriculum development or curriculum instruction, then they were able to have 8 Closing the Gap hours for every 1 credit hour with a cap at 24 hours. Listening to some feedback from our teachers, we upped that for 1 graduate course to 10 career ladder hours. But again, that big change would be having 50% of our hours being student contact. And the reasoning why, I have a lot of requests for professional learning, for tasks that aren't going to move us academically. And so the biggest bang for our buck is when we have kids. So when we're doing tutoring, when we have kids for clubs, we're at least giving them a safe place. We are providing mentorship, all of those things. Professional learning is super important, so don't get me wrong, it is. But I believe 50% of our hours being student contact hours will help move us academically compared to what we have now. And you guys can chime in too, because part of this plan that I will send to DESE is including teachers in that process of the development of this. And so I want your guys' feedback. I know I've sent this to our group and our focus group way before now, so they can review it and give me some feedback. But if you guys have any other things to share, food for thought.
I totally support the 50%. Yeah, I think that's a good thing.
Okay. One of you had asked me about, maybe it's in our leadership cohort. So I think there's a misconception out there that has to be like a tested area or a core area, right?
Oh, I think I sent you that. So for running the academic labs like after school, I think they're under the assumption, so like tutoring, it has to be a core subject, so the teachers that don't teach a core will go to the academic lab to do tutoring hours.
Which I think is great. No, I think that's great. But I also know we have the central PE teachers in our leadership cohort, and they had asked about having clubs. So if I'm a PE teacher and I'm certified in PE, and I'm going to have a club after school that's a weightlifting club or a running club, that would count as student contact hours. As long as they are certified in that area, that would be acceptable. Yeah.
Because we want to encourage kids to move too.
Absolutely.
Also, I'm assuming with the mentors that mentor the first and second year teachers, they probably get a stipend or pay. But are you going to include that as being hours? Because it may be more worth it to them to use career ladder hours. And then we might get a few more people to volunteer to mentor. Because sometimes that pay isn't a whole lot, I know, but we might get a lot more mentoring of our first and second year teachers if that's included as something they can use to use.
And it is something that they can do.
They can use.
They did that this year, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
So
Good.
they chose to go to
Yeah.
Close the Gap hours instead of, it was a $500 compensation for mentoring a new teacher.
But I know like if you're on stage 3 or whatever, you know, the compensation would be far better used under
Yeah.
career ladder than that $500. So and it may then open up some people to be more willing to mentor those first and second year teachers. Good, awesome.
Any other questions or feedback for me on this piece? Can I see if we have support? Because this is something that will probably proceed with our DESE plan. Is everybody good with that to move forward?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is this going to go to the board, or is it just taking approval from the committee?
Just the committee at this point, and then once I have it approved by DESE, then I would take it to the board. But yeah, I need to get it approved to DESE by April.
And is there a match for the district with DESI, or is it all paid through the DESI grant?
60%, 40%.
40 for the district, 60 for the grant?
Correct, so that's part of the grant process. So when I apply for that, I'd also apply for the grant. So once I have all those logistics ironed out, then I would take it to the board.
Is that 40% already budgeted?
Yes, through Dr. Seegers, he knows it's coming, but it's, I say yes, but it's really dependent upon how many people sign up at each stage. And so that's something I'll have to get feedback from our teachers. So I have to send all that into DESI, and then their calculations are dependent upon how many teachers you have at stage 1, stage 2, and stage 3. Thank you. Good questions. And item number 3 on the agenda is our kindergarten readiness data and kindergarten enrollment. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Adams.
Okay, kindergarten readiness. I presented a little bit about this in the fall when we received our kindergarten observation form, or the KOF data. What we were waiting on, we had our local district data, we were waiting on the state's data. So the state's data just came out, so you have a handout. The handout that looks like this is, you'll see at the top, St. Joe School District. This is our KOF. This handout here, ASR at the bottom, this is the DESI, the state data. So you can kind of compare, just to give you a brief synopsis, in St. Joe, 42% of our kids are kindergarten ready according to the KOF, and the state has 57% kindergarten ready. The closest we were with the state was social emotional development. We only had a 2% deficit there. Social emotional development was the domain that our school district grew the most in over the past year. The biggest deficit would continue to be in that language and literacy domain. The state's at 58% ready, and we are at 34%. So there's a 24% gap there. We know that. We are addressing that with our new early literacy curriculum, and also some new curriculum resources in K through 2 along the lines of phonics and phonemic awareness. So our UFly implementation, I think we're seeing some good data points with that already. But so how are we responding to this data? Well, first, we're building awareness. We're sharing it. We're sharing it with teachers. We're sharing it with principals. We're sharing it with the community. If you remember, we developed that kindergarten readiness flyer that has all of those, how are you ready for kindergarten in the St. Joe School District, and that has been sent out through the community. The other piece, the other response is working with United Way in Success by 6, or Kinder Club. So Kinder Club, it kind of dwindled away a little bit during COVID, but it's back, and we spent a lot of time with teachers and some principals and United Way drafting what we wanted that to look like, and I really said, here's our kindergarten readiness data. If you could help prepare our incoming kindergarten families for what it looks like to be kindergarten ready in response to this data, that would be awesome. So that has been the focus for Kinder Club. Kinder Club sessions are happening in every elementary school twice this spring with incoming kindergarten families. It's our first opportunity to build homeschool attachment with those families. Another response is a change in our kindergarten enrollment. So that takes me to kindergarten enrollment. I've met with kindergarten teachers and principals 2 times regarding just kindergarten enrollment procedures. We met on January 30th and just Friday, February 16th, to kind of go over, we're kind of revisiting and overhauling our whole process. In the past, our purpose for kindergarten enrollment would be to screen children, and those screenings would take a half hour for each child. And it required a lot of substitutes during the school day, which is hard to accomplish. We don't have that many subs available. And it takes away from the instructional time with our current kindergarten teachers and kindergarten students in the classroom. So how can we accomplish kindergarten enrollment and screening without taking away instruction? So we worked together in looking at screening tools. We looked at a variety of districts around us and what they used. And so the team, the first thing is there's a flyer here that's been developed, and it promotes kindergarten night. There'll be 2 nights. The first night would be April 4th, and the second would be April 9th. It's 5 to 6:30 at each elementary site. We're going to ask families that have the last name A through L, students' last name A through L, to come on the first night, April 4th. And on April 9th, all students with the last name N through Z. We're going to try to have interpreters there and have all that set up. The big change for us on this night will be that kindergartners coming in will be screened that night. So we will meet with parents. We will have them start the enrollment process. We're going to encourage summer school for them. Each family is going to have a packet to fill out of lots of great information, and then there'll be a presentation that each principal goes through with all of the parents. So we also developed a new screening tool, because I said to kindergarten teachers, what are the most essential things you would need to know? In the past, we used a lot of that information to submit to the state. We now have the kindergarten observation form, the KOF, that we submit to the state. We don't need to send that information off to the state anymore. We really just need that information to know how we can best help kids. And so they've narrowed it down to, well, we need them to be able to identify letters. We need to know what sounds they can make. We need to know if they can grasp their pencil correctly, if they can write their name, if they can count, if they can recognize numerals. So the screening is down to a one-page document. We're thinking it's going to take about 5 minutes per child. So it's a new process this year, but I think it's going to be for the best in the long run. And afterwards, we're going to survey teachers and take information back. And each parent that night will get a kindergarten handbook. And so that's what we're looking forward to here in April with bringing our new families in. So, yes.
I'm sure you thought well ahead, that interpreters,
Yeah.
those that the information in,
Yeah.
Local languages,
Yep.
Chuukese
Yep.
and Spanish.
So all of these documents are going to be translated. I've been working with DLO's department and to locate, we don't have interpreters for every single school for every night, but our schools that have the highest population that would need that will have an interpreter that night. We also have the language line available for everybody at any time. And so I've asked principals to also have a staff member there at each site that's willing to help kind of facilitate that language line. So Parents as Teachers has been great. They have a couple of employees who are bilingual, and so they're going to send some of their folks out to help us. And so we also have some teachers in the district that are bilingual, and so we're going to encourage them to stay and help with us that night. They can receive Close the Gap hours for that too.
So you'll be doing the observation form, and you'll still be doing the ASQ and the ASQSC?
I'm not sure the ASQ. The kindergarten observation form happens in the fall with
Okay.
all kindergartners.
And then the
it's not
AS
and then,
She's on vacation. Go ahead.
ASQ is on the preschool side where they screen.
yeah,
And
that's.
so they're going to do that still do that in the screening for the kindergarten kids entering?
That,
Yeah, if they're entering for preschool, they do the ASQ.
Just for
They
preschool.
don't do the ASQ when they enter kindergarten.
right,
Okay.
yeah, I was like,
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
That's okay, gotcha.
yeah, so. Any other questions for me? The teachers looked at all of the different screening protocols and determined what they felt was most important.
I got a question. What's High Road School?
I can also answer that.
Oh, yeah.
That is a program that is housed at Webster for some of our significantly special education students.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Did you have a question? Yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I saw you raise your hand for a question.
Oh, no.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Lacey. We will move to item number 4, which is our iReady diagnostic data for elementary and middle school. And Dr. Lau will take over from here.
So if you didn't get it there, I tried to put it as many stations as I could. And what Dr. McGinnis asked me to do was to present our middle of the year data. Basically in reading and in math. And you can see from the report that it is not by grade level, but by school. But it also gives the overall district report. So we'll start with reading, and you will know that it's reading if you look in the upper left-hand corner. It does say all schools, and then underneath it, it says reading. Just give you a moment just to make sure you have the right report. So when we look at this, basically what we are looking at with iReady is our kindergarten through 8th grade students. And we are looking at how they're performing in the middle of the year. So you may or may not recall, but we do this right when they get to school in August, just to see where the students are. And then we do a second diagnostic, and that is taken in early December. So just kind of keep that in mind, because this is middle of the year data, or even, a little bit ahead of middle where we're in early December. So the question would be, okay, so why would we do that? And the answer is really so that we can get a better understanding of where kids are, so that as we move through to the end of the year, that we can take some steps, whether that be at the teacher level, whether that be the leadership level, whether that be at a district level or professional development level. So there's a whole host of options that we would have. We don't just have to look at the data and just wring our hands. There's things that we can do to help improve that as we head into our end of year testing and then our MAP testing. So some examples of that would be Dr. Adams had me work with her principals to go over this data, and in concert with Stacia's team, the instructional coaches, so that they could better understand it. And then Stacia and I worked with iReady to even do a further, very detailed analysis with instructional coaches, so that then the instructional coaches can take that information back to the teachers they work with and utilize that to shape instruction, and also just from the lens of data analysis. So that's an example. In addition to that, Dr. Gilpin hosts middle of the year data reviews with all of her principals. Dr. McGinnis and I go with her to discuss this data with her principals, amongst other things as well. But it is another approach to why would you do this right now. And so while you may look at the data and look at the proficiencies from the lens of perhaps end of the year, just please keep in mind this is middle of the year data. And so what would I say about the reading data? The green, as per typical, you probably guessed, usually means good, go, good. Yellow, that would be where we have kids 1 grade level below. And then in the red zone, you can have kids either 2 grade levels below or 3 grade levels below. And those are kids that we are, very concerned with in terms of at risk. And even in the middle of the year, if you're still solidly 1 grade level below, that's a concern, but it depends on your individual score as to how close you might be to getting to be early on grade level or on grade level. Because what we want is for kids to be on grade level as measured by the end of year assessments that they take from the state. So you can see from the reading data, we're at 21% of our kids would be on grade level. So if the world were going to stop and those kids took the end of year math test, and it was a good day, the sun was shining and all went well on that one day, then roughly 21% of them would be proficient. But we have 20% of our kids that are early grade on grade level, and this was taken in December. So what does that tell us? That tells us that there's a pretty good chance, and we don't leave it to chance. I just gave several examples of how we don't leave it to chance, that we can continue to move those kids towards grade level mastery. And so you see 33% would be 1 grade level below at the middle of the year. And again, that can vary depending on that kid's individual score as how that student got placed in that particular bucket. So we have some that may be very close to edging into early on grade level, and we have some that may be very close to just eking out of 2 grade levels below. So we look at that data. And then in terms of 11%, and that 16%, which I mentioned was our at-risk, what are we doing in terms of intervention to help those students? What are we doing in terms of instruction to help those students? And so that's been something that we've worked very closely on. You know, as Dr. Adams mentioned, and all the work that certainly Stacia and her team have done in reading with, and I think this may or may not be familiar, but the acronym is UFLY, but essentially it's an approach to helping kids read early. So if we really drill down and look at that data, and I won't go over all of the metrics, but we went over it today as a team, when we really look at our K1-2, which is we have to get that right if everything else is going to be looking right, we've seen some marked improvements. To the tune of, just as an example, because I won't give too many metrics, but in first grade, when we look at the first graders who made improvement in placement this year as compared to last year at the same time, this year it's 70% of our first graders have made improvements in their placement in terms of whether it be green, yellow, or red. We've seen improvement, and this time last year that was only 37%. So we're pleased with that because this is a first-year approach to a new way of helping our kids better understand how to learn to read. And so usually you don't see results that marked in a first-year implementation. You can even see a dip sometimes in a first-year implementation. So that is kind of the who, what, where, why, when of this particular report. And happy to take any questions you might have. The only thing that I would also add to this discussion, which is not as bright as the data point that I gave you, but it is one of stability. When I look at our 24 data, our 23 data, our 22 data, and our 21 data at middle of the year, it's very much the same. So we don't want that to be the case, but we also don't want to see it markedly declining either from those baselines. So what the data last year at the middle of the year was very similar to what we're seeing right now, and that ended us at a 37% proficiency on the grade level math test. So just kind of to give you a feel for what middle means to the end of the year, and you can see that 21 plus 20, if you add up the greens on this report, is roughly, is not just roughly, it is 41%. So that's just a little bit, that shows a lot of kids that were early on grade level ended up being proficient at the end of the year. But we need to get more of we need to continue to move more and more kids into that green area. And that is, the approach is to do it, to get the K1-2 kids reading. So when we hit that third grade, first year testing in math, we see that improvement. So we're looking for that. So with that, I mean, I'm happy to take any questions you might have on the reading portion of this.
You may not be able to answer this, but what is kind of ideal versus realistic? I mean, obviously we're never going to have 100%,
Sure.
But what would be a good goal if we said in 3 years our goal and our midpoint would be kind of this kind of breakdown? What is kind of a realistic goal we could set as a district?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why we look at districts like ourselves, so that, because that is a very hard question, like, what is good? Is 100% good? Is 70% good? So when we look at high-performing districts that are similar to us, for example, if we looked at North Kansas City, or if we looked at Park Hill's about 60% proficiency. If we look at Liberty, and I just gave this data, I think the last time we all got together, maybe the time before, you can look back at those comparison sets and see what it is we should be shooting for. For our district, we need to move on past being in the 30s. We have got to get solidly into the middle of the 40s and keep advancing so that we're competitive with your Park Hills, your North Kansas Cities. We outpace Independence, and we outpace a lot of the districts that are more similar to us. So that is a testament to our teachers and the growth that they're producing in these kids. But in order to increase our proficiency, we've got to grow 26%, the kids in the red, we've got to grow them 3 grade levels in 1 year. And so that is a heavy lift to be able to do. And what that means is the instruction has to look different in order to do that. And so those are the things that we're working on.
And kids need to show up every day.
Yes, you do need to show up every day.
And iReady standards are very close to DESI standards for like the grade levels?
Yes.
Okay.
That data's been pretty stable within, reading is more closely like predictive of what we'll get on the grade level math test. Math is predicted a little bit low, but right now, the predictions have been valuable enough to continue forward with that. Okay, so if you're ready, we'll move on to math, and it's a very similar report. And I've got to pull mine up on my computer, but unless you want to share.
Team math here.
Yeah, if there's an extra math, that would be lovely. That way. And so basically, what we're looking at is essentially the same report, but in terms of what does the green mean, what does the yellow mean, what does the red mean. And so essentially, what you see there again is this is taken early December, K through 8. And so we're looking at kids that are on grade level, that's 12% at that point in time. 16% were early on grade level. You had 45% that were 1 grade level below. Again, reminding you that this is middle of the year. 12% and 14% that we would be concerned with would be 2 or 3 grade levels below. And so that would be very similar to this report. And in terms of what are the things that we're doing there, it's the same type of things. We worked with the principals, we went over the data, we worked with the instructional coaches, we went over the data. There is, and of course Station, her team can certainly talk to this, working through some adjustments to math curriculum, and some things that we're doing there in terms of professional development. So again, the point is the same. We take this data in the middle of the year so that we can make course corrections. When I look at the data, the math data, over the course of 2024, 23, 2022, and 2021, again, it is similar over the course of those years. And so this middle of the year data where you're seeing 12, 16, 45, 12, and 14% in each one of those buckets has resulted for us at the end of the year at a 30% proficiency rate in math, but that's taking into account that our Algebra 1 is a point of that factors into that when we look at what the overall district score is, and that has been right at 16 to 18%, so that tends to bring us down a little bit, as does the 8th grade. So those are areas that we're also working on and have plans in place to try to improve in those areas as well. So in terms of the growth data that we're seeing in math, it's not quite as hopeful as the data I pointed out in reading. However, it continues to be stable in terms of what we're seeing over the course of those years.
Is there data before 2021 that's available in the same manner that shows? I'm just wondering how far back do you have the data, and can you see a marked difference? Because I'm looking at the middle school high percentage in the red, and thinking how much of that is post-COVID, they didn't get the foundation they needed when they were in second, third grade, so now we're seeing the results.
Yes, and so that is something, and that we could spend a lot of time on. I have a beautiful slide deck. I will send it to Dr. McGinnis, and she can certainly send that out. But when we're looking at data, we're trying to get, and I would say we're not the only ones, even from a national perspective, we're trying to get back to what were we doing in 2018, 2019? And yeah, the data looked better. It looked better nationally. It looked better from just, iReady serves a lot of districts across Missouri. The data looked better. We are very competitive in reading when it comes to trying to get back to the 2018-19 levels. But in terms of looking at us compared to other Missouri schools or us compared nationally. But with math, we're not seeing as an aggressive as a comeback that we would like to see. Not that we're out, in left field, but we're not as aggressively coming back in mathematics. We were, and now we're kind of seeing a little bit of it tapering off. And so that's of concern to us. Yeah, but that wouldn't, both of them, yeah.
And Dr. Lau, attendance was better then, but isn't that when we first started the attendance incentive? So we can't really say attendance would make a difference in that?
Well, and if you look at attendance in 2018, 2019, we were at 90% of the district. So, and now we ended last year at 79%.
Big difference.
And you may recall that, it is national data, so if you look at your comparison sets that we looked at last time, the only district that beat us last year, I'm not competitive, but the only district that beat us last year was Liberty Public Schools. So everyone, and they're 19%, free and reduced, where we're, 73 or 70% under-resourced. And so our kids, just by the nature of what we work with, our attendance interventionists have more barriers, and that we work with, whether it's transportation is a big one, housing stability, food scarcity, just all of the things that we work with our attendance interventionists. So we are not, slacking off, especially if we're trying to overcome those barriers, but that is nothing like 90% of the attendance.
Right.
So that has an effect on instruction because attendance is the #1 equity indicator for kids. If you're going to change a kid's stars, they need to be in school. Everything else is right.
Exactly.
How many kids did you say are more than one grade level behind?
In reading or math?
Either.
I can even want, do you want these gone?
Oh, you want these?
Well, there's some right there.
But how many kids get held back?
I don't think she heard you, Mom.
How many kids get held back if they're more than a grade level behind?
Well, that is a retention decision. I don't know what our percentage is on that, so I'd have to get that from Dr. Adams and Dr. Griffin.
It's not very many. Traditionally, we just haven't had that.
Well,
If kids are more than one grade level behind, shouldn't they be held back?
I think there's a lot of research on that actually harming students, but that's also not on the agenda.
Dr. Lott, do you have a question? Do teachers do like assessments throughout the year on the students instead of doing iReady?
Yes.
Because I know like having students and hearing them talk about how much they hate iReady, like, and when you go into doing the test and you sit down and it's like, you don't want to take this, you're not going to give it 100%, so like, sometimes I feel like the data might not be like 100% if a kid is like clicking through and giving.
And that's a proctoring issue, so we worked really hard on that, and that's why I think we see data that's pretty stable. But no, this is just 3 times a year.
Yeah.
So they give assessments, all the time in our classroom that are just very informal, or they create their own assessments. So it's not something that's the sole thing that they have to monitor where kids are in their learning.
So like, even though some of these that could, on iReady, they could be saying that they're 3 grade levels behind, they could actually not be 3 grade levels behind.
It could be that, but typically what we look for is like red rush flags or kids that rush through the assessment, and then we can reset it so that we get a better feel for where they really are. Otherwise, we're flying blind and we don't know where they're learning is.
Yeah.
And you have that on the MAP test. I mean, it's a snapshot of time. It's that given day. Is the kid really wanting to take the test? Do they feel good? Do they not feel good? Are they sleepy? Are they not sleepy? I mean, that's the bad thing about baking everything on state assessments, because it's just a snapshot in time. It's one day, you know. And so that's kind of, these tests are the same way.
Standardized tests are kind of hard to judge because the teachers with a child pretty much every day, they're going to know kind of where they're at. And a standardized test, like you said, is that one day on how that kid is going to be. So.
And so much rests on it.
Yeah.
I appreciate your comment though about iReady, because I share in those concerns that kids kind of rush through it and don't take it seriously. So that's something we've all been very mindful of, but we actually, I think, did that to ourselves a little bit, because in the very beginning of iReady, we required a certain amount of minutes. Teachers had to do that. And so if you're a kid and you repeatedly do that, you get exhausted with it, you get tired of it, you don't enjoy it anymore. So that's no longer the case. So I feel like because we don't have those minute expectations anymore, kids are taking it a little bit more seriously, not getting burnt out on the platform.
Yeah, because I know that happened to my son last year. He skipped through and ended up dropping a lot of points because nobody caught that he was just skipping all the questions until they brought it to us that his reading level had dropped a lot. And it was just, he told us, I don't want to take this test, it's boring. And so.
That's something we're addressing. I'm sorry?
Why are we spending money on it?
So that we know where kids are at and their ability level, and then we can guide our instructional practices.
We just spent 10 minutes talking about how it's not a true reflection of where the kids are.
I don't think we spent 10 minutes on that.
Okay, fine. But how did teachers evaluate their students before we had computers?
And they still do that. This is just one assessment piece, but they still have many informal and formal assessments along the way. Any other questions about iReady?
I hear a lot of the work that you're doing. I hear you adjusting the curriculum, adjusting who's working with the teachers. Do you anticipate any additional support staff in order to increase numbers and or decrease class sizes and or small group sizes?
Yeah, I'd have to defer to Dr. McGinnis on that.
You're talking about increasing staffing?
Of any sort, maybe not a full-time teacher or a classroom teacher, but do you anticipate any, like what support will there be any other additional support needed in order to close that 26% gap that you're wanting to make?
As far as staffing goes, we look at that by building. And Dr. Segrist, if he were here, would say we're not increasing any staffing. But I think sometimes we have to shift resources or supports to where the needs are in a building. And so Lindbergh is an example of that. We know that their class sizes are too large, so we're moving kids from there into field. So just making those shifts based on our needs. And then it may be a case where if the numbers are high that we have a para support. It's really a case by case.
Well, and we're just looking at I work at Bodie, so we're looking at what would work best for our staff and our kids, like what resources we have. So I just didn't know if there would be additional support for teachers to make up that gap. Because again, I feel like setting teachers up for success, and if they see these numbers, they might not feel as successful as maybe they think they are.
Part of our plan for next year is to implement the professional learning communities. And so I think part of that will be helpful, as long as we can carve out some time where teachers can truly collaborate and work through the data cycle process, have that collaboration time. I think that will help. But again, when there's needs, we look at that case by case and try to provide those supports and resources. And hopefully with Career Ladder, offering the tutoring support for our kids too, to get them closer to grade level.
So that would be in addition to the RTI that's built in during the day?
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
Does I already have the option to have the test like spoken to if you put on headphones?
Yes.
Yes.
And some of our students in special education have that accommodation
Yeah.
on their IEP.
But do you have to have like a 504 or an IEP or something to have that done?
Not in the elementary world, no. That can be offered as a universal support.
Is that in
Speech.
secondary as well?
Yeah.
I just know that, you know, and I'll bring up the corporate world again, you know, they do the CBTs all the time, computer-based training, instead of going to classroom. And the newer ones have the questions or the materials spoken to you, and, you know, you can read along, right along with it. I think that's a big help, in my opinion.
You're all right. Any other questions for us? We have about 3 more minutes. On anything that we've covered? Or comments? Yes,
I
Reba.
had a first grade class the first couple of weeks of school, and so we were getting ready to do I-Ready, beginning of the year assessments, and those students loved it. Of course, it was a first grade class, and I'm very encouraged about the 30% to 70 on reading. I think YouthLine has been a very helpful curriculum.
And Abby Patterson could speak to that because Abby was a pilot last year, and so what we did was we don't just roll out new programs without looking at student outcomes. So Abby served as a pilot, and we watched her classes grow. So.
Yeah, they really, my students right now, because I teach kindergarten, they really love YouFly. They're like excited to read the words, so it's definitely been a good program to help with the reading and just adding more opportunities for them to read in the classroom. So.
And it's no screen time, right, Abby? It's all interacting one-on-one with kids and connected text, sounds, letters.
Decodable books too, and yep. And then like, you know, for my school, we're sending home decodable books every week, so they're also reading at home with their parents. So we're trying to, bridge that gap too. So.
Okay, if we have no other questions, we'll go ahead and adjourn. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.